the much anticipated 2024 Toyota Land Cruiser. We are late to this party, or at least late to releasing an official video, despite attending the launch program. And here's a diplomatic clip of Mark explaining why our original Land Cruiser video was never released to the public.
A couple rock crawls, creek crossing, no faster than we can walk out there. Have fun.
All right,
Remember, you got running boards on this guy, so just be mindful of that.
Understood.
You know, I think this is difficult. For transparency to the people watching this stuff, you're going to see a million videos on these cars. And these launch events are not structured for us to really have at it. We're going like 2 miles an hour. You know, we're not really driving these things to their full capability. They could be a lot better, they could be a lot worse than we're saying. So I want people to understand that, like, we're working within the confines of how they've structured this event to move hundreds of people, media, in and out of these programs. So
and not getting to drive the Land Cruiser on road as well as off road is a huge disservice. Now that we've spent more time with this vehicle, we've had a week with it, let's talk about what it is from an interior perspective first. We're in a 1958. This thing starts in the mid-50s with destination. It's closer to the higher 50s. This is the base model. Cloth interior, manually adjustable seats, no premium audio system, no heads-up display. This is the most honest version of the Land Cruiser. As you move up to the regular Land Cruiser, the non-1958 model, it starts in the low 60s, reasonably equipped, it's in the high 60s. The top trim, at least for 2024, is the first edition. It's in the low 70s. As you move up the trim levels, you get things like JBL audio system, cooled seats with leather appointments, a heads-up display, a bigger screen, multi-terrain select, a different front fascia. The 1958 gets a more retro front look with a different grille and different headlights. As you move up to the more premium trim levels, you go to a square headlight. Just general features that make the vehicle feel more upmarket, because this sits between the upcoming 4Runner and the Lexus GX, and all of these are essentially on the same architecture. Now, from an interior perspective, let's get back to the 1958. These cloth seats breathe very well. They are heated. They are pretty comfortable. The leather seats are even more comfortable as you get more adjustments. The Land Cruiser is only a 2-row vehicle. The GX can be had as a 3rd row. It's technically a little bit longer, despite sharing the same wheelbase. The load floor in the trunk space is a bit compromised due to the battery pack being underneath. It's a bit higher. That said, they did not screw up the load floor like they did in the Sequoia. So it's even. You have 38 cubic feet of cargo capacity. With the rear seats down, you have even more. And you get a split opening rear tailgate, meaning the glass can open up separately from the actual metal hatch. It is a very cohesive design. All the controls are physical. The dash is nice and low. It's compact. Everything is easy to use, and you have great visibility. In an off-road vehicle and something you're going to use every single day, they've accomplished that very well. And when it comes to the premium features, the JBL audio system goes a long way in making this a more tolerable long-distance cruiser. The center console in the higher trim levels can be cooled. It's essentially a cooler. While you lose some of the storage, it makes this a more usable car for longer road trips or for camping. This is a very nice place to be, and I think Toyota has done a good job. Exterior styling, while I did talk about some of the changes from the front, this is sort of a retro future look. Regardless of trim level, I think the front is quite striking. The side profile looks quite good, but the rear 3/4, it's supposed to look like a J80 series Land Cruiser, but to my eyes, unfortunately, or fortunately, it looks like a Dodge Nitro. So that, let's head in the shop and put this thing up on the lift.
Toyota Land Cruiser, this is one of the most important truck models in Toyota's history. And we did do a video on this that we didn't release because it was horrible and I didn't want to rush it out. So we're doing this with a little bit more detail. We did off-road it at 2 miles an hour when we learned a lot about that, namely that my Murano Cross Cabriolet could have done the same off-road course probably quicker. But tell me, since this is new, what is it?
First off, I'm very excited. So in about 30 years, when I see this thing rolling around in the Middle East in some war zone, I'll know more about it.
Yeah.
This is the J250 generation or 5th generation Land Cruiser. This is technically the light duty variant, where we used to get the full size or the LX variant of the Land Cruiser. This is built on the same platform as the upcoming 4Runner and the currently sold Lexus GX. This sits in between those two products. So the 4Runner is the more economical and hardcore variants of what this is offering. You can get like a Trail Hunter or a TRD Pro variant along with your luxury versions. And the GX is the luxury variant of this. It's essentially the same platform, but you get optional AVS on that vehicle, adaptive dampers. You get a 6-cylinder engine, which is arguably more premium, and you get EKDSS. Those premium features are reserved for the GX. The Land Cruiser sits between both of those. However, things like approach and departure angle are more substantial in the Land Cruiser versus the GX. They do feel that more people will off-road this vehicle, do some more overlanding with it, get 31 degrees of approach angle in the front, which is like 6 or 7 degrees more than you get in the GX. This is also a shorter vehicle, despite maintaining the same actual technical wheelbase, and that's all for approach and departure angle. And you get 8.7 inches of ground clearance in this vehicle. When it comes to suspension, it is non-AVS in this car, which means non-adaptive dampers. You get a multi-link front end, you get a live rear axle on the back. This thing tows up to 6,000 pounds. When it comes to drivetrains, you have essentially one option for this. Unlike the 4Runner, which gets a 4-popper and an optional hybrid, or the GX, which gets a V6, the Land Cruiser in the US only gets the iForce Max 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. It's direct import injected. The ICE side makes about like 270, 280 horsepower, and the electric motor with the nickel metal hydride battery makes about 48 horsepower. It's good for 0 to 60 in the mid 6s. Real world fuel economy, the argument for a 4-cylinder in a vehicle like this isn't great, if I'm going to be entirely honest. My driving, 17, 18 around town, just over 20 on the highway, which is pretty similar to the old V8.
The thought process is the usability in terms of low torque applications, low speed applications, and higher speed applications efficiency. It's got a bigger bandwidth of performance, whereas the V6, the old V6 and the V8's really, you had a little bit of torque at the start, but you really had to wind those engines out quite a bit more. So the versatilities here, again, it's a 4-cylinder. You can't get around that. The pro part of it is the nickel metal hydride battery pack has been around since the dawn of man. It supplies just the right amount of power to give this vehicle the electric assist that it needs without having to go to lithium ion, which the pack almost doubles in price when you go to the lithium pack. And, so a lot of this is about serviceability, ease to get in and out. You can get at the pack at the top part of the car. It's going to be cheaper to replace if you're keeping this for 20 years. And the 4-cylinder that's in here, we bemoan the 4-cylinder, but this is one of Toyota's most reliable engines currently.
Of their new engines.
Well, at
least compared to the V6.
Well, right. And again, we're talking about a first of its generation product here. So this, like every brand that comes up with a new car, a complete overhaul, you're going to have the growing pains. And this is the first generation of it. So it will improve. But, you have to understand that just because it's Toyota doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect from the start. These are modern vehicles.
So this has a full-time 4-wheel drive system. It is common across all the various trim levels. They all get a Torsen lockable center differential. So when you activate the diff, it locks at the 50-50, and then you have a locking diff in the back. The only real difference between the trim levels when it comes to a mechanical perspective, other than the wheel and tire option, is the higher trim levels get a disconnecting front sway bar. Past that, though, they're all basically the same vehicle. You could argue the base trim level is the most honest. It is the least to go wrong with it. It's made in Japan, unlike the Tacoma, which this technically shares a lot of the same parts with, and when it comes to the gearbox, that might be a problem long term. This is a true Japanese product. All the engineers that worked on this are Japanese. We talked to the GX engineer, and they worked side by side with the Land Cruiser team. This is a Japanese product that they sell across the globe. Yes, we only get the regular gasoline variants, unlike the rest of the world that gets diesels, but this is a Japanese product. Ready to experience some 4-cylinder magic?
I'm getting ready. Did you launch it? So right off the bat, since you're talking about performance, I know we talked about this in the shop, but from where this transmission and engine was from the last generation, where it felt like shifting was a planned project, the crispness, the smoothness of the gearbox, the engine performance is It's really smooth overall. It's definitely zero inspiring. It sounds like something that would be in a $20,000 car.
And it sounds even worse outside when I was listening to the B-roll. It's just idling there. I'm like, man, is this thing broken?
Yeah. So you're not buying this for the engine. You're buying it for just, hopefully it's the ultimate appliance in terms of delivering performance consistently.
Lots of torque.
Yes.
Very smooth. Around town creeping in traffic, and if you're going off-road like we did at 3 miles an hour.
Yeah, and we were fragging 1-inch puddles on the off-road course in some loose gravel. So if you're one of those guys like us that has a ton of like adrenaline, you want to get your fix, it can do that too.
But because the power comes in so low, if you do need to rock crawl or do whatever you're going to do, this is more than capable enough. I'm going to talk about its on-road driving dynamics, as this is where it's going to be spending probably more than 90% of its life, compared to some of the older Toyota truck products. Right? To me, if you're looking at this, you're coming from an older 4Runner, you're coming from an older GX. What this does better than those vehicles is its on-road driving dynamics. It doesn't wander as much at highway speeds. It does a good job, riding properly. All the inputs are fairly natural.
It's actually really refined.
Yes.
It's really refined, and I know it better be for this type of, this money, but it doesn't feel as like...
just a hint.
It doesn't feel like a big, huge-ass truck. It drives really good. When we're talking about like Bronco or Wrangler or these off-road SUV things, it has none of those compromises here. This is probably the most refined version of any of the TNGA-F products that we've driven.
Other than the GX.
Other than the GX, this is really, really good. I think people are going to like how it is.
Compared to the GX, I think EKDSS paired with the AVS dampers and the V6 make it a more sporty feeling vehicle. This is, as I just demonstrated, incredibly low limits, and these are the more road focused tires. This isn't an all-terrain that's on this. This is straight up Nerf on-road big SUV tire, but moving yourself from limit handling, it's really quiet. I will say past, let's say 65, 70, you hear like you do in any of the big boxy SUVs, a lot of wind noise off the windshield, but it's ultra refined. There's minimal head toss. For a vehicle like this, it's really good to drive.
And the fact that this isn't 20 years ago, right? Like where you had to have a lot of compromise between off-road and on-road vehicles. This has a center lock option, a rear locking diff. So, I mean, you can still do everything with the right tires. I think people that think, oh, I need this off-road vehicle, most of the SUVs can do all of this stuff now way better than the older products could. And that's why you would choose this, right? It's kind of that do everything. And can you tell me why I would choose the 1938 edition?
This is the cheapest variant. It's under 60 grand. I don't know what residuals are going to be like.
Probably high.
Probably high. I mean, honestly, probably very high. It is a Land Cruiser. I think this is the most honest of the trim levels. You don't need most regular people don't need the front disconnecting sway bar. These cloth seats they breathe really well for being a cloth seat. It's a fairly low BS, 2-row off-road capable SUV.
And I know you talked about the interior, but having physical controls for HVAC, you don't have an enormous screen in the base trim level. The screen on the gauge cluster is very simple, and the driver or the passenger can't see the screen. It's kind of blocked out. So I like the simpleness of this. To your point, it's one of the best things. And yes, it's still a lot of money, or 58 grand, right?
Yes,
it's still a lot of money, but it's something that should be in your garage for quite a long time.
Yeah, assuming the drivetrain, and again, Toyota, as I'm sure all the comments are going to talk about, Toyota's lost its way. It doesn't have the quality it used to. I do think long term, as Toyota fully matures this drivetrain, the gearbox and all of its other, let's call it questionable components, these are going to be really stout like you're used to from Toyota. Yes, there have been some teething pains with the current generation trucks. The Tundra is totally botched, but this is a Japanese vehicle. They care about it. When we talked to the chief engineer at GX, they spent a lot of money on this architecture. Hopefully this thing's going to be good. And if it's just as reliable as the last one or nearabouts, it is a better driving vehicle 99% of the time. All right, Mark, so with that, let's head into final thoughts.
Let's do it. Final thoughts on the Toyota Land Cruiser. We finally drove it on the street. Of course, we had some half-assed time with it on the off-road course, but we've driven every TNGAF Toyota truck at this point, and this is the best iteration, except for the Lexus GX, of course, which is way more money. And it does a great job because the ride isolation, the ride frequency, the body control, the drivability is all very natural. It feels very good. It doesn't feel rough, bouncy, jolting, because you're gonna spend most of your time driving this on the street. You're not taking it off-road. But I said this in the drive, it's not like older trucks where you had to decide between an off-roader and a street car and they had to be so compromised for one or the other. That's not a problem anymore. This can do everything. And I think that's why you're gonna buy it. You're also gonna buy this because it's not something you have to lease. Yes, it is too expensive for what it is, like pretty much every vehicle. When you look at the base trim level for like 50 grand or 55,000, you know, cloth seats, very basic things. That's the appeal of this, because everything's very tech laden and overbearing these days in this segment. So if you like that, you're gonna love this. Pretty much everything else is subjective. I see a lot of Toyota like fanboys making apologies for the things that this doesn't do right, but overall, I think the subjective nature of the styling, the cohesion on the interior, the drivability, and the reliability of the 4-cylinder drivetrain, yes, it's crazy that we're talking about a 4-cylinder in a truck like this, but it does work. I'm gonna leave it to you. Is this a hit or a miss? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.